Right. Welcome everybody to our webinar here today to learn more about the effort to designate an International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. Looks like we've got folks coming into our room, so we are going to wait just a few more minutes here until everybody is in attendance. So thank you for your patience, and we'll just be a few more minutes here. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Leah Biondo. I'm the Director of Federal Affairs and Government Relations with the Society for Range Management. We're joined here today by three excellent panelists who are going to introduce themselves while they speak to give a presentation or an update on the effort to designate an International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists. And I won't spoil any of their content here today, and we'll turn it right over to our first speaker here, Dr. Lane Kopic. Please feel free to kick things off. Let me share my screen here so you've got your presentation handy. All right, go ahead.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Leah. And hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're going to be speaking about the International Year for Rangelands and Pastoralists proposal for 2026. And this proposal was originally forwarded by the Government of Mongolia and is currently navigating an international approval process involving the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization and the UN General Assembly. This webinar provides a concise forum, particularly for North American stakeholders concerning this initiative, and we're aiming for a 30-minute presentation overall. My name is Lane Kopic, Professor Emeritus at Utah State University. I've been involved with global rangelands for over 40 years, and I'm a co-chair of the North American Regional Support Group for the IYRP. So our objectives today are, as written, we're going to be discussing the purpose, process, and key issues for the IYRP. And we're going to clarify how American decision makers, particularly federal decision makers, can help us in this process. Next slide, please. So the webinar will be constructed as follows. After my brief introductory remarks, Leah will present two short videos on global rangelands and grasslands. That will be followed by Dr. Barbara Hutchinson, who will give a talk on the recent history of the IYRP process. I will talk about some of the activities that are planned for the IYRP beginning in 2021, should it be approved. And we'll wrap up the formal presentations with a talk by Dr. Bill Payne, who will address the question as to why the IYRP matters to the United States. Finally, we'll have a very brief summary of main points with a question and answer session, and we ask the webinar audience to please refrain and hold your comments until that time. Next slide, please. So rangelands and grasslands, for those of you who are less aware of them, are landscapes that are typically dry, they're typically seasonal. They can be warm or cold in terms of annual average ambient temperatures, but they're dominated by grasses and shrubs, scattered trees. Their economic uses typically involve livestock production and other forms of resource extraction. They're home to important populations of wildlife, and they're home to many valuable and indigenous cultures of pastoralists, ranchers, and other residents. Over half of all terrestrial biomes in the world are labeled as rangelands or grasslands. The challenges and opportunities for these systems are diverse. Challenges include resource degradation, poverty, rural conflict, struggles with governance. But these systems offer a vital spectrum of ecosystem services and associated opportunities when they are well managed. A primary example would be the enhancement of global carbon sequestration to mitigate climate change. These issues will be discussed further by Dr. Payne. So our goal is to promote wise and equitable use of rangelands and grasslands. They're often misunderstood ecosystems, and it is important that we manage these well for the world's future. Why an international year? There have been dozens of international years under the auspices of the United Nations in recent decades. A common goal for an international year is to raise awareness, better coordinate programs, and fill knowledge gaps. And indeed, these are goals that we share with our international year proposal. Why do we need support from American stakeholders? Well, we need support from all stakeholders, but in particular, we're interested in federal decision makers. And this is because key federal agencies, such as Departments of State, Agriculture, Interior, may be asked to weigh in when FAO and the UN General Assembly debate the merits of the IYRP proposal during 2021. These details will be described further. Please visit the website, the IYRP website, for more background information. So what follows are two short videos showing images of global and North American rangelands and grasslands. These videos have special value for those webinar participants who may be unfamiliar with these systems. Thank you.
All right, that was the global perspective. Now we're going to show what it means to North America.
Rangelands dominate the western landscapes of North America. They come to life in the prairies, which stretch from the parklands of Canada across the Great Plains to the coastal prairies around the Gulf of Mexico. Rangelands are also revealed in the sagebrush steppe of the Great Basin and in pinyon juniper woodlands and oak savannas. Shrubs and cacti characterize rangelands of the southern United States, extending deep into Mexico. The benefits of rangelands are many. They supply forage for livestock, providing food and economic stability for rural communities. Rangelands are also important habitat for wildlife like elk and deer, plus migratory songbirds and waterfowl, and they house vital pollinators for healthy ecosystems. These landscapes also harbor rich soil communities and supply clean water and air. The sun and wind, which characterizes rangelands, can be harvested as sustainable energy. And these landscapes also provide abundant recreational opportunities and magnificent vistas.
Hi, I'm Dr. Charles Hart, 2020 President of the Society for Range Management.
All right, now we'll turn it over to Barbara Hutchinson for a history of the IYRP initiative.
Thank you, Leah. Hello. Well, that's a hard act to follow, I must say. Those are wonderful videos. As you heard, well, my name is Barbara Hutchinson, and I'm a project manager at the School of Natural Resources and the Environment, and I have been involved in the Rangelands Partnership, a consortium of 19 Western and Great Plains land-grant universities since its beginning nearly 20 years ago. Also, for more than 5 years, I have been working with an amazing group of like-minded and committed people and organizations in the US and around the world to gain a United Nations designation for an International Year of Rangelands and Pastoralists, or IYRP as we call it. It is my pleasure to give this presentation on behalf of the North American IYRP support group, and in it I'll provide an overview of the history of this International Year initiative. Next slide. We believe there are numerous reasons why we believe an IYRP is both timely and critical. We need to increase worldwide understanding of the importance of rangelands and pastoralists. We need to inform decision-making at all levels and mobilize people worldwide to address today's challenges, such as climate change and food insecurity. And we need to boost efforts for creating new knowledge and sharing experiences and practices related to rangelands and pastoralism. Slide 3. However, the road for gaining support for the idea has been a long one. The first discussions for an International Year of Rangelands were held at several international rangeland congresses. However, these early attempts did not lead to further action, and it was not until 2015 that the current effort began in earnest. Drawing on the successful example of the 2015 International Year of Soils, members of the Rangelands Partnership and the Society for Range Management began exploring how such an international year could be achieved. In 2016, attention turned to the United Nations Environment Program and the Assembly, where countries were debating how to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. This led to passage of an IYRP-related resolution. By early 2017, a more formal steering committee had been organized, including a secretariat that established a preliminary website for the effort and which continues to be maintained as the IYRP archive by my team at the University of Arizona. Between the years 2016 and 2018, the steering committee promoted the International Year in multiple fora, and members were involved in compiling the UNEP gap analysis, the case of benign neglect. Among other issues, it highlighted the lack of a balanced, integrated approach to understanding complex social, economic, environmental, and political facets of rangelands and pastoralism. By the end of 2018, it became clear that an IYRP proposal would first need to be presented and approved by FAO, and that there were numerous steps to be taken in that process. To this end, a ministerial breakfast event was held at the UNEA 4 meeting that resulted in the commitment of the Government of Mongolia to take the lead on an international year proposal. In August 2019, the Mongolian government presented its formal intention to FAO. Next slide. Here you see the major actions in the process for gaining UN approval for the international year. In October 2019, the Mongolian government submitted a full proposal for an MOU to FAO's Committee on Agriculture, COAG, the first big hurdle that we had to climb over. By early 2020, 18 formal governmental letters of support had been received, with another 42 countries offering verbal support at COAG, including the entire EU. That was a major coup. To provide ongoing leadership to the process, a national working group was established in Mongolia, and the IYRP Steering Committee then changed its name and nature to the IYRP Support Group. Next slide. Prior to the current pandemic, it was expected that the final proposal and letters of support would be presented in person to COAG for discussion in October of 2020, and that a side event and displays would need to be organized for the meeting. However, when the meeting was moved to a virtual environment, Mongolian officials and members of the ISG quickly developed an electronic outreach plan that we believe greatly helped gain the endorsement of COAG. A key component of that outreach was the development and launch of the online booth, the website that you see on this slide. This was a monumental worldwide effort that was put together in less than a month. It involved the creation of original documentary videos, as well as collecting videos and photos from all over the world to represent pastoral groups and rangelands everywhere. There are now 11 regional groupings on the homepage, and behind each one are videos of the voices of pastoralist peoples, as well as more general videos. In addition, on each page is a rotating list of logos from the organizations who are supporting the effort, including 60 logos from organizations in North America. At the same time as the launch of the website, a targeted social media campaign was also organized and implemented. This largely involved the use of Twitter messages directed at the COAG ambassadors, and it was clearly highly successful. Next slide. Now, regional support groups have been formed and are holding regular meetings. These groups are creating action plans and reaching out to other groups and individuals to support the Mongolian proposal. Eventually, the idea is to facilitate national action plans, including outreach activities and programs. Priority actions of the regional groups include gaining additional letters of support from governmental agencies and NGOs, as well as bringing the effort to the attention of others through relevant meetings, conferences, and webinars. Raising awareness of rangelands and pastoralist issues and challenging misconceptions are high priorities too. And the members of the regional groups will continue to help populate the online booth and conduct their own social media campaigns. Next, we will hear more about current and future activities for the IYRP. Thank you.
So Leah, we need to back up on a slide here. There we go. Well, thanks, Barbara. And thanks, Barbara, for all your hard work from both you and the key committee members who've been following this for the last 5 or more years. There is a draft action plan for the International Year for Rangelands and Pastoralists. This action plan is about 8 pages. It's been prepared by what we're calling an international support group from the IYRP with the Government of Mongolia. So in this very brief presentation, I'm just going to hit a few highlights about the content of this draft action plan. Now, given that the international year would occur in 2026, we see an important 5-year run-up phase if the 2026 date is approved. And the partners in this coalition have identified some potential activities and priorities. Again, until the IYRP is formally approved, you can see that these activities and priorities wouldn't be necessarily fleshed out to the degree they would be later. Most of the costs are expected to be self-financed. That's the reality, but there will be efforts to mobilize additional resources. Next slide, please. So some of the priorities indicated by stakeholders include improving the routine exchange of experiences, raising awareness, particularly with a focus on shared values, heritage, and development or conservation challenges. Again, acquiring funding to tackle common problems, and importantly, building local and regional capacity for problem solving. Next slide, please. The organization of themes can be envisioned from a diagram such as this one, where there's a different theme for each month of the year during 2026. This, of course, is very flexible. It could be modified by different stakeholders in different situations, but I think it illustrates the diversity of issues and how they might be organized. For example, we could start with January, just kind of getting some common ground on who pastoralists are and what rangeland systems entail. And then moving through issues, special themes such as securing mobility, social and economic services, climate change, sustainable livestock consumption, sustainable livestock production, indigenous knowledge and culture, moving to gender, for example, concerning women, the future of pastoralism with regards to youth, and closing with sustainable technologies and innovation. So this same type of framework has been used by other international year situations, and so we see it as very valuable. Next slide, please. As has been mentioned briefly by Barbara, this preparatory phase 2021 to 2025 is important because of how it's organized with regards to regional actions, national actions, and global actions. We have something on the order of 11 regional support groups. These are unique and they serve advocacy and coordination roles with regards to specific regional perspectives. Nationally, we are still in the process of recruiting national support. We expect this to be greatly elaborated as the process moves forward. And the role of nations then is also in terms of designing, executing, and implementing priority activities on the ground within their borders. Finally, global actions are mostly founded on the generation of knowledge and the dissemination of knowledge. For example, this fall, the International Rangeland Congress, International Grassland Congress in Kenya will be held. The Society of Range Management will have annual meetings with components devoted to the IYRP, and there's a series of other professional conferences as well. More effort will be devoted towards the generation and dissemination of global database on pastoralism and rangelands. And there's many opportunities for specialized webinars and meetings, and some of which will dovetail back in with priorities for the United Nations Decade declarations. Next slide, please. So 2026 then is the culmination of the previous 5 years, plus the banner year of 2026. This is when there will be synthesis of lessons learned, where success stories will be communicated, where the dissemination of information will prevail, the designation of national days to celebrate achievements in the rangelands and grasslands. Regional activities then would then aggregate national and local activities in terms of exchanges, celebrations, and recognitions, okay? And opportunities to coordinate cross-border research and social media campaigns. Finally, global activities once again will focus on the generation and dissemination of knowledge. Special conferences in 2026 will be especially important, and also with the perspective of, to the extent that sustainable development goals are being met from the activities in the rangelands and grasslands. Next slide, please. The hierarchical organization of the IYRP is unique. So we've got local, national, and regional perspectives that will all be integrated. And under the auspices of the lead UN agency, we don't know which agency that might be, but major partners of the international year may establish a global steering committee and a global communications team. So facilitation from the UN lead agency will be very important in that regard. Next slide, please. There will be an evaluation of the effectiveness of IYRP activities, and the evaluation process will be determined in this preparatory phase. Processes will follow UN guidelines, and there are useful examples of recent international years, such as the International Years of Soils, where evaluations have been successfully undertaken. Thank you.
All right, now we will hear from Dr. Bill Payne. Let me pull up his presentation here. All right, ready when you are.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Bill Payne. I'm currently the Dean of the College of Agriculture, Biotechnology, and Natural Resources at the University of Nevada, Reno. I'm not a range scientist, but I've been working in dryland agriculture for some 40 years, beginning in Mauritania as a Peace Corps volunteer in the early 1980s. Mauritania was a very interesting place because it was overwhelmingly pastoral, and in fact, at independence, 90% of its population were still nomadic. In the early 80s, when I was there, it was rapidly transitioning to a more sedentary one, largely due to drought and other forces. And since then, I've been working in dryland agriculture in various capacities, either in dry areas of the United States, including the Panhandle of Texas and Eastern Oregon, but also internationally. I spent a lot of time in West Africa and East Africa and the Middle East. I played an advisory role to the United Nations Convention to Combat Desertification. And I was recently, before coming to Nevada, I was a director of a CGIR research program on dryland systems, which included 25 countries. And certainly there was a lot of pastoralism in those countries. Next slide, please. I think the overarching reason for an international year of rangeland and pastoralists was put very well by the current president of SRN, Charles Hart, who said it would provide an opportunity to raise the profile and support for rangelands and pastoral issues globally and nationally, improve understanding of the challenges and opportunities faced by the rangeland ecosystem and pastoralists, and direct increased attention and resources to rangelands and those who manage them. Next slide, please. So rangelands are obviously very important to the world and the United States. A recent mapping exercise by the UNEP summarized that 54% of the world land surface is rangeland. But in the United States, it's almost a third of land cover, or about 770 million acres, and about 53% of the land cover in the Western United States. And I've shown the importance of rangelands in the map in the Western United States in particular, and in the world. Next slide, please. So as has been pointed out earlier, rangelands are critical to more than 500 million pastoralists in the world, but they provide a diversity of ecosystems and therefore significant yet diverse economic benefits through these goods and services. Those include livestock production, wildlife habitat, tourism, recreation, minerals and energy production, renewable energy, and intangible historical, cultural, aesthetic, and spiritual services, particularly for indigenous populations. Now, evaluation of those ecosystem goods and services is not easily done, and it's not without controversy, but a widely cited study in 2011 by Costanza and colleagues estimated that it was about 18.4 trillion per year globally, and that would imply roughly a United States value of about $1.3 trillion. And so, again, people can debate that, but the point is it's sizable. And a better understanding of those ecosystem services, which is promoted by the IYRP, could substantially increase the economic value of those goods and services through better management. Just one example is that United States grazing lands, it's been estimated by Lau and others, could potentially remove 198 million tons of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere each year. And that would offset more than 3% of US carbon emissions from fossil fuels, and it'd be worth about $4 billion at current carbon prices of about $20 a ton. And it will also further increase the value of those rangeland ecosystem services simply through improved soil properties. Next slide, please. As the group is likely aware, poor stewardship, inappropriate policies, climate change, and a host of other factors can degrade the value of those rangeland goods and services. And the results, most of us are familiar with, but they include fire, drought, various forms of land degradation, including erosion, invasive species, threatened species, and loss of biodiversity. Just for wildfire alone, the annual cost is anywhere from $71 to $350 billion. The Bureau of Land Management, which governs most public rangeland in the Western United States, is experiencing ever more massive and frequent range fires. We don't talk about fire season anymore in Nevada, it's all year long. Over the past decade, almost every Western state has experienced a rangeland fire that has exceeded 100,000 acres, with some surpassing 500,000 acres. And that comes with the loss of those ecosystem goods and services. The massive fires reduce ecosystem services and necessitate substantial investments towards rehabilitation. Just one example is that the BLM had to pay almost $35 million to perform emergency stabilization and rehabilitation for the 2012 Holloway fire, which burned almost 500,000 acres in Nevada and Oregon. Next slide, please. There are other reasons why the IYRP should matter to the United States. In other words, one reason, first and foremost, is that the rangelands make up such a huge proportion of the United States. But there are other reasons. We know that climate change and water shortages are expected to disproportionately affect drylands, which are made up largely of rangelands. And I've shown that in some of the maps here. The one on the bottom left hand is just a map showing aquifer withdrawal. And so coincidentally, some of the very places that are going to will undergo climate change disproportionately are also those where they're unsustainably withdrawing water from aquifers. And so those two facts alone, climate change and water shortage, are expected to cause massive conflict and outmigration. A quote from the British delegate to climate change of the United Nations stated, massive migrations, particularly in the arid and semi-arid areas in which more than a third of the world's people live, will turn fragile states into failed states. The UN Security Council recognizes outmigration as a threat to peace and security, particularly where there are ethnic and social tensions, and that we just described much of the drylands. The IPCC also noted that the greatest single impact of climate change would be human migration. The most repeated prediction is 200 million by 2050. And no nation, including the United States, should assume that they're somehow going to be hermetically sealed or protected from these outmigrations. It's already underway in Africa and in the Middle East, and we've seen the results of that. Mexico and Central America are likely to see climate outmigration too, especially under the more pessimistic global climate circulation models. And it's important to understand that that will not be gender neutral. We know that women as a group are poorer and less powerful than men, and so they will suffer proportionally more from that outmigration as a result of water shortage, climate change, and conflict. Next slide, please. In the 1930s, W.C. Loudermilk of the Soil Conservation Service studied agriculture in countries where land had been cultivated for hundreds and even thousands of years in search of ways to address ecological damage from the Dust Bowl. And it's important to understand that we've already seen this in the United States. Massive migration because of mismanagement of land and the intersection of that with climate changes in climate and poor policies. He found that soil erosion, deforestation, overgrazing, neglect, and conflicts between cultivators and herdsmen had wiped out entire civilizations. He also learned that careful stewardship of the Earth's resources had enabled other societies to flourish for centuries. So it's another reason why the United States should be interested in this International Year of Rangeland and Pastoralists. I've shown some of the damage that we've seen, that I've seen firsthand. I worked in the Panhandle in Amarillo for several years, and of course, I show a slide of a dust storm here from 1935 as a result of the Dust Bowl. I've shown another one in northern Nevada in 2016, and then another one from Burkina Faso, which is where my wife is from. So the IYRP partnership seeks to better understand at the regional, global, and certainly national scale the stewardship policies and processes that protect and improve ecosystem services and economic benefits provided by rangelands. A greater understanding of those will inform efforts to better manage rangelands to improve food security, habitat, and biodiversity. But as I tried to argue, better management has potential to mitigate climate change, increase the value of those ecosystem services, and limit outmigration. And those in turn have the potential in many parts of the world to improve political stability, lessen conflict, and reduce gender inequity. Thank you.
Right, thank you. Go back to our presentation here.
So Leah, the conclusion slides, there we go. Great, thank you. So in summary, I'm just going to boil down our messaging here today to 5 main points. We believe that the International Year for Rangelands and Pastoralists addresses important issues at various scales. The creation of the proposal has involved a detailed process involving a number of very dedicated professionals. The action plans are organized and will be organized via a hierarchy, local, regional, global, national, over 6 years actually. And the International Year offers shared values and objectives with U.S. government federal initiatives. And there will be evaluation that will occur throughout the 6-year IYRP process. Next slide, please. Again, the IYRP proposal will be voted on in June, actually within the next couple of weeks with FAO, and then again in September with the United Nations General Assembly. And what we're hoping with regards to federal decision makers is that they will inform the voting process in both of these venues, and we are seeking approval from the US government in these situations. Can the US approve or at least abstain when the vote comes regarding the international year? Or will the United States object? We're certainly hoping for the approval or abstention given the situation. Next slide, please. So now we would like to open the floor for questions, comments, and discussion. I'm going to step aside for just 1 second. I'll be right back.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you to our presenters here today for some really excellent information. Please feel free to drop any questions, comments, concerns, discussion points in either the chat box or the Q&A feature.
Thank you.
And I don't see any questions coming in, so we'll just wait another few minutes here. Any questions, comments? All right, we do have one. What department of USG is most influential on a decision to support the international year? State, USDA, USAID? Barbara, I might turn this question over to you.
Sorry, I was just typing my, I was going to put my email address into the chat so that people could write if they have a question. But so let me see, what department of US government is most influential? Well, of course, first of all, State Department is going to be the one that actually makes the vote. So of course, the State Department is the highest on the list, but we do feel that the State Department will be willing to certainly listen to those from USDA, I would say would be high on the list, of course, USAID, but even Interior, really any level of the government pursuing and putting forward a support for the international year and getting that information to the State Department is really critical. And so that they see the outpouring of support across the country that we've had already. Just on the North American webpage on the International Year website, we have 60 organizations, including the National Wildlife Federation and many others that are of national repute and also academic institutions. And we're getting more every day because we've really only just started to really reach out, thanks to SRM, thanks to Lane, thanks to Bill, and so many other people. So your help is really critical. Please help us get the word out. There will be, Aaliyah can tell us more about this, but there will be a recording of this webinar, and we will be pushing it out far and wide, and we hope that you will send us questions, any concerns, and then just get on board with us to make this happen.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank you for the question. Any others before we give you all back your morning or afternoon, depending on where you're dialing in from here today?
Leah, I'm just wondering if I could just add one comment to Barbara's reply.
Absolutely.
So SRM has contacted a large number of American stakeholders, and we have sent them information that concerns much of what you've seen today. But what the next step is that we're going to be sending out what we're calling a group letter that will go to the department heads for state, agriculture, and interior. And then we're going to have a large number of signatories of stakeholders appended to those letters. The letters will further describe the process that's coming down the pipeline, okay, particularly with regards to the General Assembly, and what we need from these various departments. So a link to this webinar will be provided in the group letters, and hopefully this will complete a circle, okay, of information sharing that will be useful. Thank you, Leah.
That's an excellent point. Please, we cannot do this in a vacuum. We need your help. If you wouldn't mind sharing this information or the recording with your fellow colleagues or other decision makers, we'd really appreciate it. I don't see any other questions, comments, or other clarification from our attendees here today. So with that being said, we will be posting this recording online for all to see. And as Lane mentioned, we do have a stakeholder letter with almost 50 US stakeholders signed on supporting the International Year designation. We're hoping to get that out here this week, so you are all the first to know about it. This is a breaking news moment, I suppose. But thank you all for joining here today. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and
There was the final question, yeah, from Matthew.
Excellent. When will the group letters be sent to the agencies? We're hoping by the end of this week. So be on the lookout for that here by Friday. All right, excellent. Feel free to reach out to me for any other questions or to get in touch with any of our panelists. That's policy@rangelands.org. Otherwise, thank you all for joining here this morning or afternoon, and we'll talk to you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.